Welcome to Look Around Florida.
Hi guys, I'm your welcome to Look Around Florida. I am your host, Sean McFall, aka the Florida Man. I'm glad y'all could be here today. I got Ronnie Kennedy. He's in the background right now. We're going to be bringing him up here in a little bit. We're going to be talking about his new book that he got out based on Reconstruction. So I'm looking forward to that. Just want to remind everybody March 15th, Linden Cemetery at 11 a.m. Start time, start time's 11 a.m. They're still looking for color guard and a rifle squad. If you have a uniform and a rifle, would be appreciated. Uh, hey, Bobby, Roy. Hey, Linda. Let me get this out of the way so I can keep myself out of the doghouse, so to speak. Alrighty. Oh, Linda's on YouTube. Sweet. Now, keep in mind, I hope y'all loved the last episode when I had Bob Highball on, and we talked. Hey, Heather, we talked about the Florida Division reunion. So if you get a chance, you still have time to get your registration in. Just go to this website that's scrolling at the bottom. You can register. You can get your hotel. They even have a Q&A section there. So you may be thinking of a question. Take a look there. If it's not there, just get with Bob Highball. His camp's putting on this year's division reunion in Ocala. So, Jeffro, Annette, Beth, Bob Ganier's in the house. Hey, Heather, good to see ya. Keep in mind, we got 28th annual SCVMC annual, June 19th to the 22nd, in Traverse, Florida. This is going to be a fun event. They got Leonard Skinner tribute band coming in on Friday night. If you need the registration, it's on the Facebook page. If you need one, hit me up or Ronnie Nichols. He's doing all the paperwork and coordinating everything for that event. And of course, the 160th anniversary and the 48th annual reenactment of the Battle of Natural Bridge, March 1st and 2nd. Natural Bridge Battlefield Historical State Park, 6 miles east of Wynford on Natural Bridge Road. If you have any questions on this event, feel free to hit up Mark Best. His camp takes very pride in putting on this event. See who we got in the house. All right. Hey, Kim. Hey, David. Hey, Keith. Everybody that sent me stuff, we'll be talking about it next Tuesday. And I do appreciate everybody that sent stuff in. Keith, Annette. So want to say thank you to everybody that sent stuff in. I will talk about that next Tuesday. I want to give Ron Kennedy enough time. So let's give a warm welcome to Ron Kennedy. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it. And I hope everybody in Florida, and I see we got somebody from David from East Tennessee. So I hope everybody's having a great week. It turned off a little cool here in South Louisiana. Let's see, it's 58 degrees. That's cool for us, but it's supposed to get down, maybe even freeze later on this week. So we're bundling up. Sean, do you want me to just jump in and start talking about my book, or do you want me to first say a few things about the National SCV that I know? And I'm not a an official. Okay, I'm just like everybody else listening. I'm a member. My brother is a CIC, so I quite often get information from him that's permissible to be told. He doesn't reveal any secrets or anything. But
Well, you can go into either or you want to. I already put the disclaimer up, so it keeps us out of the doghouse.
all right. Well, I just wanted to remind everybody that the 21st Century Confederate Heroes campaign is still ongoing. We've got we've got the major debt paid off to the bank mortgage on the museum. And a lot of people want to know who paid that. Who paid that? Well, I'm going to tell you right tonight on Look Around Florida who paid it. And I can tell him. So y'all listen real good now, because I'm going to tell you who paid that banknote off. Because the people that paid it off are the people who are listening tonight. You all paid it off. And why do I say that? I say that because way back when I was working with Jason Brochures, and he was CIC, and I was the chief of heritage operations, we were, I think we were going to Florida. I don't know, but we were on the road going somewhere, and he said, look, there's some guys that have a lot of money. I'm talking real money, not like, Ron Kennedy or Donnie Kennedy. I'm talking real money, and they are willing to put some real money into the SCV, but they're concerned that we're not being good stewards with the money that we already have. So, and at that time we owed like $2.5 million on it, on that bank mortgage. And he said, if we'll work hard and get that bank mortgage down to a lower sum, I believe they'll come forward. And you, the members, you took the bull by the horn, as we used to say in Mississippi, and you made it happen. You gave your $5, your $10, your $100, your $1,000. You gave and you gave and you gave, and you showed those people that, yes, we are good stewards of the money. And I can tell you this, that as long as there's a Kennedy around in the SCV, we're not going to ever get in debt again. Now, the people that are working hard to pay these debts off are not the people who made the debts, okay? We're the ones that were left with the problems to solve. But you people, good members and friends of the SCV, you are the ones that's responsible. When those big money people saw that we were willing to do our part, they stepped up and paid off, I think it was close to $1 million that they paid off on that bank mortgage. The bank mortgage is gone. That was the one we were really concerned about, because it was due in July of this year, and we had it at like a 3.25% interest. But if we had to renew it, it was not going to be at a low interest. So we had to get rid of that, and you all did it. So if you want to know who gave that money, who finally gave the money, it was people like you all who did it, because you showed these moneyed people that, yes, we are good stewards of the members' money in the SCV. And I got news for you. There's other people out there just like that are watching us. So let's keep going. We want to get this Forest Plaza up. We need you to join the 21st Century Confederate Heroes. Your camp can join. You can join. You can pay $1,000 up front, or you can do like the Kennedy is doing. This Kennedy's doing. The poor Kennedy. I paid $100 down and paying $50 a month. I'm gonna pay it off. So, but you don't have to pay it all at one time. So that's one thing we want to make sure we get that Forest Plaza up, because when we do, and it's going to be done within the next year, at 6 months to a year, it'll be done. We're going to have a big celebration. Everybody that has joined the 21st Century Confederate Heroes will have primary seating there at the plaza, so you'll be able to be the closest to the plaza when we have the big opening. And it's going to be a celebration of not just putting Forrest back up on his pedestal and completing that plaza. It's going to be a celebration of everything we've done since that fool in South Carolina went in and shot up that black church, and we got the blame for it, although we had nothing to do with it. Some scallywag governor in South Carolina inferred that Confederacy was a problem, and it started the destruction, massive destruction of our monuments and our heritage. But here's the thing. We have put up more monuments. We've restored more monuments. We put up more flags, very similar to the one down in Tampa. Large flags, small flagpoles on interstates all across the South. We've put up more than they've taken down. And we're going to celebrate that when we open this Forest Plaza. So join the 21st Century Confederate Heroes. Help us get this plaza done. Help us celebrate, because we're not just celebrating one little monument in Columbia, Tennessee. We're going to celebrate all the big flag down in Tampa. We've got way up in Virginia. They've got parks that's been open. There's parks all across the South that's been open since all this started. There's been monuments like the one that we're so proud of here in Louisiana that was going to be destroyed in Shreveport, Louisiana. Well, we raised heck with them, and the parish government actually paid to have it moved from downtown Shreveport, where nobody ever saw it anyway, and moved it to the battlefield of Pleasant Hill, battlefield that we own the area now where it's at. So, there's things like that, and we're going to celebrate. We're going to get the word out across the South. We're going to have news releases. We're going to let the world know that they take them down, we put them up, and we put up more than they've taken down. Another thing we've got going on is in April is Confederate History Month, and we've got billboard campaign going across the South. I know there's 9 going up in Virginia. We've got 6 going up here in Louisiana. There's Tennessee's got some. I think Texas has got. I think there's somebody said there's 1 or 2 going up in Florida. I don't. Y'all have done billboards in Florida in the past, but we're trying to get one orchestrated where at 1 month, all across the South, if you drive across the South on the interstate, you're going to see Celebrate Confederate History Month, Sons of Confederate Veterans. We're getting our word out. Now, the important thing about that is that not only does the general public see it, which makes it easier on recruitment, folks, when people know who you are and they see it's an honorable thing to be a part of, but the local politicians will see it. And that is very helpful when we're wanting to maintain monuments or replace monuments or restore monuments or get the right to march in a parade showing our flags. This is very, very important. So those are the 2 big things that I wanted to talk about going on with at the national level.
I do got an answer for you from our AOT councilman.
Good old Roy Hudson. All right, good. Thank you, Roy. I appreciate you. Had a great time down with Roy and Linda during their Lee Jackson banquet. It was a lot of fun. It was a long drive, but it was still a lot of fun. So hope to get to come back again. My wife and I really enjoyed ourselves. All right, you want to talk about my book?
Sure, fire away. Just let me know what picture you want when.
All right, why don't you put a picture of the book up in case anybody hadn't seen it? The title is Reconstruction, Destroying the Republic and Creating an Empire. And this book, it took me a year and a half to 2 years of research and writing to do this. So it's quite a book. You could take that down now. This. I don't want to be too much self-promotion on this, but it's very, a lot of people say, well, why do you write a book about Reconstruction? There's been other books written, and boy, there's been some great ones written, especially in 1929, 1935. There was the Tragic Era. I don't know if anybody's ever read The Tragic Era by Claude Bowers. It is a wonderful, well-done book, and there's been some by contemporary Southern scholars that has been done. But this book is different in that I just don't look at 1866 to 1877, the time when active Reconstruction was going on, bayonet rule in the South. I look at it from the very beginning, all the way back to 1787, because I point out in the book that the problems with the federal government was baked into the system. And we had Southerners like Patrick Henry. He said, this union with this Constitution, nothing wrong with the verbiage of the Constitution, but the people that we're going in union with, they outnumber us, and they're different people, and they're going to eventually use this Constitution and the power that it bestows on them once they gain control of the federal government to infringe upon our rights. Now, Patrick Henry, he was a strong, what they called then an anti-federalist. Someone asked him, Patrick, how come you didn't go to the Constitutional Convention where the founding fathers organized and wrote the original Constitution? And he said, I didn't go because I smelt a rat. Well, so that sort of tells you what Patrick Henry thought. And it wasn't just Patrick Henry, it was quite a few. Matter of fact, at that time in 1787, 88, when they were debating whether or not to ratify the Constitution, initially the anti-federalists outnumbered the Federalists, but a lot of amendments was put in, and promises like the Bill of Rights was put in and promised, and a lot of things was promised in the Federalist Papers, so that it allayed the fear of the anti-federalists enough to ratify the Constitution. But the problem was baked into the system. And I call that the South's first strategic failure. And in this book, I outline 5 strategic failures that the South made. The first one in 1787, 88, all the way up till today, and we're still living with a major strategic failure. But that's why I wrote the book. Now, the book has 32 chapters. 15 of those chapters are dedicated to each of the 15 southern states that went through Reconstruction. Now, this was a wonderful opportunity for me, and I learned. I was telling Sean, I learned a lot, but I think I've forgotten a lot too. So I go back and read my own book and say, "Oh, that's good stuff. Oh, that's me. Okay, all right." But each of the states, most of the time when I think about Reconstruction, because I'm from Mississippi originally, I think about Mississippi and Reconstruction. And President John F. Kennedy, before he was president, wrote Profiles of Courage. And in that, he talked about the horrors that the people of Mississippi went through during Reconstruction. Now, that was a Democrat from Massachusetts admitting that and talking about that. But, and of course, you think about South Carolina, Louisiana and South Carolina, which was the last 2 states to come out from under Reconstruction. But every state, West Virginia, most people don't think about, well, West Virginia was never part of the Confederacy, but they went through Reconstruction anyway. Maryland went through, Kentucky went through, Florida went through, and we're going to talk a little bit about Florida later if I don't run out of time pontificating. But so I learned quite a bit. Now, the first chapter and the last chapter is rather interesting with the book about Reconstruction, because the first chapter is entitled "What Could Have Been." Now, one of the major, if not the major, charges made against the South when we're talking about Reconstruction is that Reconstruction was a time in which the Klan lynched blacks, and there was killings and beatings, and it was racism run amok. That's the charge that's made against us. It's a slanderous charge. It's a false charge. But, they write the narrative, and that's what's been stuck with us. But in that first chapter, I show how prior to the war, the South wanted to and was well on the way to finding a solution to slavery. The High Road to Emancipation, I've called it in another book, but it was an actual, even to the point where beginning, Patrick Henry acknowledged slavery as evil. We've got to find a way to get rid of it. His question wasn't, should we get rid of it, but how do you get rid of it? We had the potential, the possibility of creating, for the first time in world history, a biracial society where two races, different races, could live together in the same society on equitable terms. That effort was nullified. It was destroyed by the radical abolitionists. There you go to New England again, the Yankees, the ones that Patrick Henry warned us about. They destroyed that effort. And of course, I document that in the first chapter. But also, right after the war, when at the end of the war, before radical Reconstruction took over, former Confederate officers and Confederate officials of the Confederate government wanted to work with the freed slaves in order to construct a biracial society where they even advocated for the voting rights and the civil rights of the freed slaves. That was a major concern. And I quote, and this book has over 1,200 footnotes. So if you say, oh, well, where did Kennedy get that? You can look down, and they're real footnotes, not end notes or chapter notes. You can look down to the bottom of the page and see where I got that. And that's the first chapter. The last chapter is Lincoln's secret war conspiracy. Now, all through the book, I talk about how Lincoln's war and the Republican Reconstruction set the stage for the Yankee Empire, the deep state, the leviathan of uncontrollable bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. So it was Lincoln's war and radical Reconstruction, Republican Reconstruction. So, and a lot of people say, well, what do you mean? The South started the war. They fired the first shot. How many times have we heard that? Well, I go over in that whole chapter and give the timeline and show how Lincoln secretly conspired to initiate the war and make it look as if it was the South's fault. And he did it. Some of you may, and you remember your history, remember when the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor? Well, it gave the newspapers the perfect excuse to start the war. Well, later on they found out, which wasn't that unusual, it was a boiler explosion because all the hull was blown outward, not inward. So the Spanish didn't mine and blow up the ship, but that gave a facade that the U.S. could start that war and win great territories. Well, the same thing was pulled at Fort Sumter. And also they were after Fort Pickens as well. So, but Fort Sumter was the one they got to first. All right, so that's the first and last chapter. Let's see, I've talked about Lincoln's War. I also talk in this book about the Southern resistance movement. Now, again, D.W. Griffin did a movie. It was a silent movie, and it was viewed, President Wilson viewed it in the White House. Some of you may have heard of it. It's called The Birth of a Nation. And the Invisible Empire, and it really glorified the original Klan, not the post-war Reconstruction Klan, but the original Klan. And it made it appear, and most people, even today, think that the Southern resistance movement was strictly violence, Klan, beating, lynching, shootings, et cetera, cross burnings, you name it. That is not the case. That is far from the case. The Southern resistance movement was primarily a political movement. And because it was a political movement, they needed nonviolence. And I go in and I show how even the leaders, former Confederate officers, worked to make sure there was no violence occurred as they tried to recapture redeem the state governments. Again, and you stop and think about it. The violence, if it occurred, it would be taken by, whether it was real or artificial, it would be taken and exploited by the newspapers in the North. Well, this was to the benefit of the radical Republicans, because that meant that they could convince the Northern people to keep electing, keep them in power, so they could keep the South under control. So violence benefited the Republicans. It was a detriment to the conservative Democrats of the South, Democrats back in those days, the Southern conservatives. It was a detriment to them. So that the violence was not a major part of it was really a minor part of the Southern resistance movement. Did violence occur? Of course it did. A lot of it was vigilantism. And I point out in one of my footnotes that vigilantism occurs today in places like New York, where there's no government that's really doing its job. So vigilantism takes over. That was part of the issues during Reconstruction, but the majority of the effort was purely political. Let's see. Let's look at what happened to the people of the South once the war was over, the veterans. You have that photograph of the Confederate veteran pulling the plow, Sean, if you can find that. The veterans that came home to the South after the war, they were in terrible shape. Their homes, most of the homes were destroyed. A lot. Now this painting is done by a late friend of mine who's passed away. Since a SCV member, Jerry McWilliams, but it shows a Confederate veteran and his wife plowing their field, trying to make a crop. And look, they don't have any draft animals, but that was one of the things the Yankee Army did when it came through the South. They stole or killed draft animals, as well as beef cattle, hogs, chickens, you name it, sheep, anything, mules. So when the Confederate veterans came home, there wasn't a Marshall Plan waiting for them to help them get started. They were in a desperate condition. And this is, I told Jerry, I said, the artist, I said, do me an artwork showing just how bad off these people were, the veterans were. Now, I don't know how many of you, probably all of you, hopefully maybe have seen the movie Outlaw Josey Wales. The guy that did the script for that, his pen name is Forrest Carter. Donald and I knew him way back in the mid-'60s, worked with him a lot. He did the script for that, but he also wrote a book called Education of Little Tree. I don't know if you've ever seen it. If you ever see it, it's a great little book. But in that book, he talks about one of these characters being a Confederate veteran and having to pull the plow while his wife pushed it right after the war. And I asked, I said, is this true? Where'd you get this? And he said, that's what my family told me happened to my relatives when he came back from the war. So this isn't some made up fantasy. This actually happened. Okay, you can take that down. But it's important to know just how bad things were when the Confederate veterans came back home. Let me give you an example. This is General Garrett Andrews. He's from Mississippi, and I don't know how many of y'all know Dr. Sandy Mitchell. He wrote a book on the Confederate. I've got it over here somewhere. Encyclopedia of Confederate Generals. And Garrett Andrews is not listed in there, and we think that he was either a militia or maybe prior to the war or maybe after the war he was given that title. But nonetheless, this is what he wrote about what was going on. He said, I'm going to read this. He said, I have never suffered such an amount of anguish and alarm in all my life. I served through the whole war as a soldier and never did experience the fear and alarm and sense of danger which I felt during Reconstruction. And this was the universal feeling among the white population. I have felt when I laid down that neither myself, nor my wife, nor my children were in safety. I expected and honestly anticipated and thought it highly probable that I might be assassinated and my house set on fire at any time. Now, this is the condition that these impoverished Southern veterans came back to in the South. Now, it would have been difficult if that was all that was going on, but with the Yankee occupation, there was no judicial system that you could rely on. The judicial system was essentially what the military court said. There were no high sheriff to arrest thieves or to prevent law breaking. It was a terrible time in the South. Is it of any surprise that some type of vigilantism might occur in that time? So it's very important to understand the circumstances that our Southern veterans found themselves in when they came back from war. Now, the one thing that I really point out throughout the book is that Lincoln's War and the radical Republicans' Reconstruction, it destroyed the original constitutional republic of sovereign states that was erected by or created by the founding fathers and given its authority by the ratification of the sovereign states. So that old system is no more. And I get into a lot of trouble with pacified Southerners and pacified conservatives when they say, oh, no, this is America. This is the country this is the nation and the government that our founding fathers gave us. The Constitution is there to protect us. That is absolute malarkey. It's not fact. That government was destroyed by Lincoln. And the South was right. Donald and I say that Lincoln destroyed the spirit of the Constitution, and the radical Republicans destroyed the letter of the law. So the spirit of the law was killed by Lincoln. The letter of the law was destroyed by the radical Republicans during Reconstruction. Now, when I say that the United States government that we live under today is an illegitimate government, it is not the government that our founding fathers intended for us to have. Well, let's look at Admiral Raphael Semmes. You got a picture of Admiral Semmes? Yeah, I like old Admiral Semmes, old beeswax. He's buried in the Catholic cemetery, old Catholic cemetery in Mobile, Alabama. This is what he said in writing in 1868, talking about the change that has occurred as a result of war and Reconstruction. He said, but old things had passed away and new things had come to take their place. A violent revolutionary faction had possessed itself of the once honored government of the United States, and as in all cases of revolutions, coarse and vulgar men had risen to the surface. Now, Raphael Semmes, you can take that down now. Raphael Semmes was very, very eloquent in his writing, Service While Afloat, huge volume. But he was absolutely on point by recognizing that what we have today is different than what our founding fathers had intended us to have. During Reconstruction, as you all know, the carpetbaggers and the scallywags took over. Under Lincoln's 10% plan, a lot of people give Lincoln more credit than he's due. They say, oh, the Reconstruction under Lincoln would have been much better. And that part is right. But it's sort of like half a cup of poison instead of the full cup. But Lincoln's 10% plan allowed anyone who had registered to vote prior to 1860 or by 1860, when they had registered again and taken an oath to be loyal to the sort of like a pledge of allegiance to the new government that had been created, that they could vote. So it's called the Lincoln 10% plan. The radicals in Congress hated Lincoln. They hated that because they wanted to control Reconstruction. Well, under that plan, it would have been probably a Democratic South that would have been elected. Now, here's the problem that the Yanks in Washington found, the Republican Party found themselves. They had initiated a war and fought an aggressive, invasive war, conquered a sovereign nation, the Confederate States of America. They controlled the territory. They were intent on exploiting it politically and economically, and they wanted to exterminate the South, if not in totality, at least exterminate our political position in the United States government, so the South would never be in their way when they wanted higher tariffs or whatever. Well, there was a problem, and it's called the 4/5 problem. Prior to emancipation, or when we were negotiating the original Constitution, the northern states did not want slaves to be counted in the population. Well, according to Southern state law, slaves were human beings. Slaves had rights. They owed their service to their master, but you couldn't infringe upon their life. If you killed a slave, it was the same as killing a white man. You would be tried. As a matter of fact, I think the last trial in Mississippi against killing a slave was done right before the war in Mississippi to a white man that had killed a slave. He was tried not because he had killed the master's property. He was tried because he had killed another human being, and he was tried by a white jury, white judge, arrested by the white sheriff, and executed by a white lynchman, or hangman. So this was the South's position: was every black should be counted as a full person in the census in order to determine representation in the House of Representatives. Well, the North insisted, no, you can't have only 4/5. We're going to reduce that number so you can't come up to parity with the North. The North really wanted to keep control of the House of Representatives. That's where the spending budget increases. That's where that originates. So that was pushed through. Now, I've heard crazy people said that the South wanted that because they didn't think a black man was a full man. That's absurd. It was the Yankees that wanted that. Well, come emancipation, after the passing of the 13th Amendment, no more slavery. Well, every black person was counted as a full man. And that meant that the South would stand to gain anywhere from 10 to 12 new representatives in the House of Representatives. So the Republicans had initiated and fought this war to destroy the Southern political power. And now they find themselves, we could be outvoted if we're not, because they'll link up with the Democrats in the North, and the Republican Party will do like the old Federalist Party and the old Whig Party. It'll just fade away into nothing. So in order to prevent that, they got rid of Lincoln's 10% plan as soon as Lincoln was assassinated, and they set up their own Reconstruction plan. And in that, you had to take an ironclad oath in order to vote. And that ironclad oath said that you had to swear that you had never given aid or comfort or participated in the former struggle against the United States of America, as well as professing your loyalty hereafter. So that immediately disfranchised virtually 95% of the white South, because no man could make that take that oath. So the white South was disfranchised, and then the North moved forward to enact legislation to register to vote the former slaves. They used what's called divide and rule. They used an effort to make the black and white Southerners distrust and even hate each other. That was to their benefit. Racial hatred did not come originally from the north, from the South. It came from the North. Another fact of history that's unknown. The interesting thing is, and there's a lot more I can say about that, but I'm running out of time and I'm pontificating too much. But Senator Hiram Revels was the first black senator in the Senate. There's old Hiram, and he's from Mississippi. A really fine gentleman. He was an example of what could have been, the type of leaders we could have had the South been allowed to develop a biracial, mutually beneficial society. But he was so outdone by the way that the radical Republicans was treating his people and the people of the South, white and black, that he resigned from the Republican Party. And he sent a letter to Grant, President Grant at that time. And I just want you to hear a portion of this, what he says. He says, this is Hiram Revels' letter. He says, a great portion of them, the black voters, have learned that they are being used as mere tools. And does that sound familiar? No. Yep. Used as mere tools, and in the late election, not being able to correct existing evils among themselves, they determined to cast their ballots against those unprincipled adventurers, the scallywags, the carpetbaggers, to overthrow them. My people have been told by these schemers, again, he's talking about the Republican carpetbaggers and scallywags, when men have been placed on the ticket who were notoriously corrupt and dishonest, that they must vote for them. This is only one of many means these unprincipled demagogues have devised to perpetrate the intellectual bondage of my people. To defeat this policy at the late election, and this, I believe, was the election of 72, at the late election, men, irrespective of race, color, or party affiliation, united and voted together against men known to be incompetent and dishonest. So you see, it wasn't just the white South fighting against the black South. You could see conservative blacks voted, and I give example after example of how conservative blacks voted with and actually participated in the defense of a legitimate government in southern states all across. Let me talk a little bit before I run out of time about Florida, because most people, we think about our own state, and that was me, Mississippi, and then Louisiana. And I learned so much about the states, and I was very surprised about Florida. Now, Florida has had a state representative by the name of John Wallace. You got a picture of him. John Wallace was a rather interesting individual. He was a representative during Reconstruction. But he wrote a book, and he said, and he admitted, he said, quote, the governor, the scallywag governor, may have been a carpetbag. I think it was the carpetbag governor of Florida. The governor was forced to appoint men as county judges and solicitors, some of whom it was very doubtful as to whether they had ever seen the inside of a law book. Now, this again, similar to Hiram Revels, we see that, yes, the white South and the black South could have worked together had it not been for the radical abolitionists before the war and the radical Republican during Reconstruction. It's really interesting. You can take that down. Florida initially, when it was working under the 10% Lincoln Plan, Reconstruction Plan, it had rejected the initial 14th Amendment, just like all the others southern states that were working under the 10% Lincoln Plan. And this is what a Georgia governor had to say. He said, beyond the Postal Service, our people derive no benefit from our existence as a state in the Union. He was very angry with their attempt to push this 14th Amendment through. We are denied representation even when we elect a man who has never, in fact, sympathized with armed resistance to the United States. This happened all across the South, Tennessee, Mississippi. They would elect someone who was against the war, did not serve in the Confederate government or the Confederate service, send them to Washington, and the radicals wouldn't seat them, refused to seat them. We are at the same time subject to the most onerous taxation. The civil law of the state is enforced and obeyed only when it meets the approval of the local commanders of the troops of the United States. We are, in fact, recognized as a state for the single and sole purpose of working out our destruction and dishonor. Now, this was a governor of Florida. He really did a great job pointing out to future generations but how many people have known that? How many people have read this? I'm sure some of you all who are historians have, but the average person in Florida doesn't know about the things like this. This is what Governor Walker said. Again, he was Georgia's governor, a 10% plan governor. He was outdone. He said, we will bear any ill before we will pronounce our own dishonor. So you're not going to force me in this sovereign state, which it was no longer sovereign, but he was trying to claim it to be sovereign. The sovereign state of Florida will not ratify the 14th Amendment. But he said, we will not pronounce our own dishonor. We will be taxed without representation. We will quietly endure the government of the bayonet, but we will not bring as a peace offering to the conclusive evidence of our own self-degradation. Wow. That's a Florida man talking. That to me is one of the greatest statements, and I've got statements like that from all in every southern state. These people were fighting to try to regain civil rights for the people of the South, the white people of the South particularly, but to restore law and order and some semblance of democratic government. Now, a lot of times people will say, well, you know, the North really, they were in favor of black rights, you know. Well, no, but I'm going to just tell you up front, and I go into quite a detail showing how the North refused voting rights for the few free blacks they had in their states, and the few states that did allow blacks to vote, they put great barriers on them. They had to have bonds and that type of surety bonds and that type of thing that was not required of white people in order to vote. But this I found very interesting. You in Florida may find this interesting. The attitude of Northerners towards black and white Southerners is best demonstrated by Representative George Boutwell, Republican of Massachusetts. He suggested that the states of South Carolina and Florida should be reserved exclusively for former slaves. In other words, an apartheid system where you take all the blacks and put them in South Carolina and Florida. That way we'll have a really white United States. Quite an interesting thing. Sean, I'm about to run out of time. I don't want to, but I do want to remind people again in Florida of just what was going on as far as your state government during Reconstruction. The governor of Florida was Harrison Reed from Wisconsin. The lieutenant governor was Gleason, also from Wisconsin. Let's see, Florida's two U.S. senators were Welch from Michigan and Osborne from New Jersey. I mean, this showed that this was same thing going on all across the South. The South, and Thaddeus Stevens said that he's going to treat the South as Thaddeus Stevens, Republican from Pennsylvania, leader of the radicals in Congress. He said he was going to treat the South as a conquered province, and that's exactly what they did. They destroyed the original government, and in place of the original government, set up an all-powerful, indivisible union, which is different, or empires, really, what they set up. Interesting enough that it continues. Now, active Reconstruction, 1866 to 1877, that's when we finally got an agreement with Rutherford B. Hayes as president. South Carolina and Louisiana did a smoke-filled back room deal to make that happen. Because Florida, I voted for the Democrat, but the rest of the South did too. But the South Carolina and Louisiana was the only two states that still had bayonet rule per se. They had troops stationed, and Hayes agreed to get rid of them if we'd throw our votes to him, and he became president, which worked out. That ended active Reconstruction. But please don't ever let people tell you that Reconstruction ended when the troops left. The troops left because they didn't need to be there anymore. They could still control the South. From 1877 to 1965, we entered the era of passive Reconstruction, the progressive era. That's when most of the harm that was done by the 14th and 15th Amendments, illegitimate legislation, as well as the so-called civil rights and enforcement acts passed during active Reconstruction. That's when they were put in place. But then during the progressive era, that's when all of a sudden the Bill of Rights, which used to be held only applicable to the United States federal government, not to the states. But through what's called the incorporation doctrine, they slowly began to incorporate more and more authority and power of the federal government to reach into the state and tell the states what they can do or cannot do, what is constitutional, what is not. Remember, under our original republic of sovereign states, the ultimate arbiter of the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, the ultimate judge was we, the people within our individual states. If the federal government did something the state didn't like, the state could nullify it. And quick example, Georgia in 1798, somewhere along in there, the Supreme Court issued, in Chisholm versus Georgia, issued an order to the state of Georgia to come to the federal court and defend itself in a suit by a private citizen from another state. Well, that was one of the fears that the anti-federalists had, and the federalists said, no, that can't happen. It's absurd that a sovereign would be called before the court. And think about the sovereign as the king. The king's authority creates the court. The court can't sit in judgment upon the one that gave him authority in the first place. Well, we, the people of the states, are the sovereigns. We gave the courts, the federal government, its authority. It can't sit in judgment upon the sovereign states. Well, Georgia said, no, we're not going to allow that. And the legislature of Georgia passed a resolution. And if you want to know what real states' rights is, this is real states' rights. It passed a resolution, said, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically it said, any federal agent that comes into the state of Georgia trying to enforce that federal court order will be immediately seized, taken to the closest gallows, and hung by the neck until dead without benefit of clergy. Now, that's states' rights, folks. That's real states' rights. Now, did George Washington call out 75,000 state troops in order to march through Georgia and make Georgia howl, raping, pillaging, and plundering? No, no. Why? Because Georgia had the right as a sovereign state to nullify onerous acts of the federal government. And that was, and to show that this is a fact, within about 9 months, the other states who agreed with Georgia passed the 11th Amendment, which forbade of a state from being sued by an individual in the federal court. So they endorsed, in effect, the nullification that Georgia did. I can go on and on, but I'm getting close to the end time. I'm sure Sean's got some things he want to cover before I quit. But just remember, Reconstruction is not over. There is an opportunity today. If we, as Southern Heritage people, SCV members, if we work right, if we do our job, we can turn this red wave into a gray wave across the South, and we can be part of restoring America's original constitutionally limited republic of sovereign states. That will put an end to the deep state. Otherwise, you're just, putting Band-Aids on a bad situation. Sean, thank you for letting me just run on like crazy. I'm sure that I put everybody to sleep.
That's all right, sir. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come on tonight. But for next episode, Jerry Peacock emailed me about a Confederate soldier that got exhumed, got moved. So I'm going to get with Jerry Peacock, see if he's available next Tuesday to come on and talk about that. It's about a Confederate soldier here in Florida. They pretty much dug up him and his wife and relocated them to put a highway in. To sum it up shortly. So I'm going to get with Jerry to see if he's available next Tuesday to come on. And Mr. Kennedy, you and your brother's always welcome here.
Thank you, sir.
And you're getting a lot of compliments in the chat. Oh, our councilman said we were talking about billboards earlier.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, did I click on the wrong one? I had them.
Yeah, I saw Roy had put something up about 2 billboards.
Yeah, and I'm going back to the chat right now. One's at I-75 and the other one, I think he said I-10.
Good. Good. And let me tell you a little secret.
Yeah.
Emails is a force multiplier. So just because, thank you, Roy. Just because you don't have a billboard in your area, I don't have one in St. Tammany Parish where I live. It's one in down the road in Tangipahoa Parish. So what I'm going to do, we're going to take a picture of that billboard and we're going to put, make a little note under it, very short, saying, join us in celebrating Confederate History Month. The Sons of Confederate Veterans, we're putting these billboards up all across the South. Short, quick, a little picture, and we're sending it to every elected, potentially friendly elected official in the state. So, we may only have 6 billboards in Louisiana. You may only have 2 in Florida, but that don't mean every elected official everywhere in the state who's potentially friendly won't get a picture, and just let them see what it is and what we're doing. Don't pontificate, and for God's sakes, don't say ugly things. This is very positive. This is what we're doing. We're proud of our Southern heritage. So please use this opportunity to get the message out, and especially in your state legislature.
Amen. Thank you. Double checking to make sure I covered everything. Just the division reunion. Please check out the website that Bob Highball put together. Like I said earlier, it has a Q&A in there. You can reserve your hotel and do your registration all on one website. So, Rod, thank you for taking time out today. I appreciate it, sir. And it's February, so it's what our lovely government. It's Black History Month, so let's end the show with Nelson Webbush, one of our proud Florida Division members.
My name is Nelson W. Winbush. I'm a member of the Jacob Sumner Camp 1516, Sons of Confederate Veterans. My reason for joining the Sons of Confederate Veterans after the NAACP declared they would destroy and remove everything Confederate in 1990, I decided that I would do all I could to make sure that people understood what the Confederacy stood for.
Thank you, Mr. Webbush. Guys, until next Tuesday, stay Southern, and may God bless you in your ventures this week. Till next Tuesday, have a good night.